Summoned through the dimension of sound, people explore the musical world which they believe to be true. But there is a world, unheard by some, that is filled with stories of an unknown reality, a jazz side.
Hi, welcome to Tales from the Jazz Side. I'm your hostess, Veronica Nunn. Now, this podcast of mine is based on a love that I've had forever of the horror genre, and particularly my fascination with psychological fear. Now, on this show, my guest and I will explore these elements of fear, things that frighten us, but the show is not exclusively about what frightens us only. It's also about how we handle that fear and the unique way that we do it as artists and entertainers. Now, I have a tagline for the show, and it's called Have Podcast, Will Travel. What's your story? And besides the stories that you'll hear in this podcast, I'm also recording this live at different locations. And so there'll be times when they'll have ambient noise that'll seep through, like a police siren or dogs barking or something to that effect. And I'll do my best, that I can in order to edit those out. But that's what happens when you record things live and you go on location. Okay. Now, along with this podcast, I've written a monthly blog where I post detailed information about my guests in the show. Now, the blog is the same title, Tales from the Jazz Side, and you can find that by visiting my website, www.veronicanunn.com. Click on a tab at the top of the page or at the bottom of the page that says that. You can also follow me on Twitter. There is a follow button on my homepage on the website. Or you could do it the old-fashioned way and go log on to Twitter and search for @Tales from Jazz Side. And that's the @sign, TALESFRMJAZSIDE. And if you really want to know about all that we're doing, the blogs, the podcast, and upcoming performances, I also have a new newsletter that you can subscribe to. And that you can find that on my homepage as well. Okay. On this episode of Tales from the Jazz Side, I have the honor to be with an extraordinary person. And that person is singer-songwriter Michael Franks. Now, this show in particular is really special for me because on this date, June 10th in 1993, it was the first time I played with Michael in the band. It was my very first gig, and we played in Aruba. And that was 20 years ago on the Dragonfly Summer Tour. When I was trying to figure out when to launch this podcast, it came to me to do it on June 10th, and I would use it as my 20-year anniversary launch. I found all these photos that I had taken over the years with the band, and I put those on the website. I thought, I can invite a lot of the musicians that I've had the honor to work with because of Michael and have them as guests. And then the thought came to me about having Michael as my first guest. So I called Michael and I asked him if he would be my first guest. And he immediately said, yeah. He said, no problem. We'd be glad to do it. And that's pretty amazing. That's great. So here we are. Now, there are tons of places on the web, tons of sites that you can browse to find out about Michael, get his bio, history, his discography, and all of that. But there is some specifics that I'm just going to mention. There's his website, www.michaelfranks.com. He also has an official Facebook page, and that's where he shares photos and updates with his fans. I've posted an amended bio on my website. I've included these links that I'm talking about here. And that's, of course, www.veronicanunn.com. And that's under Tales from the Jazz Side blog. So if you click on that tab and go to the blog, I usually do a write-up of the different guests that will be on the show. I also, as I'd mentioned earlier, I did literally go digging for photos over the past 20 years. I found those and I did post them on my website, and I'm still posting. There's just so many of them, so just be patient with me, and hopefully I'll get them all up for you. So in a short amount of time, what can I tell you about Michael and his 40 years plus career? Well, he's worked with the who's who in the music industry, both artists that are in front of the scene and artists that are in back of the scene. He is a singer-songwriter of prolific dimensions. And when I say that, I mean his music is extremely diversified. He writes songs that are in all these different types of genres. He has Brazilian type tunes, funk tunes, straight ahead jazz, smooth jazz. It's amazing. So for me, there really isn't a specific category for the type of music he does. I feel he is uniquely himself. I mean, I've never heard anybody sound like Michael except Michael. Michael is Michael. Michael's music has also influenced and inspired and has been the soundtrack to people all over the world. I have heard incredible stories how Michael's music has changed their lives, or if they were going through something, they would use his music to uplift them. It just really is remarkable, and I was able to experience this with the 20 years of being out on the road with him. Michael is a poet, a novelist. He's an activist of both human and animal rights. And he is one of the most generous human beings I've ever met with his time and his talent. So join me now on Tales from the Jazz Side with my guest, Michael Franks. My guest today is legendary singer-songwriter Michael Franks. Hi, Michael.
Hi.
Thank you for being on my show.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're actually my very first guest on this show.
Wow.
Yeah, so I'm excited about that. Now, of course, you know how I feel about you. And I think those that are listening will agree with me that you are a master wordsmith. And, being on the road with you, a lot of the different fans would come up and they would share stories about your music and how your music affected them. And there was this one particular one, I don't know if you remember, but it was astronauts. And we were in Houston.
Right.
Do you remember?
I do remember. We were at a club called Rockefellers, I think, in Houston. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And the astronauts from one of the space shuttles came in, right? A couple of them did.
And they had this collage of photographs.
I still have that. Yeah, no, I have that. I got a flight patch, mm-hmm. and then, as you said, a collage of them up in the space shuttle, and they were like floating around.
Right.
I guess they listened to Passion Fruit was the record they took up with them, or the CD or whatever, the music they took up with them.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. Which one was it? Passion Fruit?
It was Passion Fruit, because I remember it said Passion Fruit lifted us.
Oh, that is like so amazing when, a person or groups of people come up to you and they have the oddest things. Because I've seen some wonderful gifts people have given you, but and some scary gifts people have given you as well. But that was I was very impressed by that.
Yeah, that's a great thing. I still have that. I think the guy who gave it to me, his name was Tom something. He was the flight physician, the flight surgeon. Mm-hmm. And one other of the astronauts on that mission was also at the gig. Okay. So I met two of them. But yeah, those are great when you get things like that.
And for me, it shows how a person's music can be woven into an individual's life and really affect their lives in so many ways. And I think that's the purpose of us as artists, is to be able to affect someone's life in a positive, empowering way. And I believe you do that brilliantly. I just want to let you know that with the lyrics and your words and the music, and it's just beautiful. So Now let's get on. Not only are you a great singer-songwriter, you're like smiling here, you also write poetry and novels. And I understand you were in a movie. You were in a movie, right?
I was in a television. In the mid '80s, I wrote some music for an ABC after school special, and first they just wanted a song. I wrote a song, and then they wanted me to write the rest of the incidental music, which I had done a few times before, which is complicating and frightening to do if you don't really do it. And anyway, I did that, and then so I got the music together. There was still a little bit of the show they hadn't shot yet, and they said, "We want you to come on the show as yourself and be in the show,
Right.
Be like an actor." So I reluctantly agreed, which was probably a big mistake. And
When was this?
this was in '86, I think.
Okay.
And the show starred this British actor named Michael York, who was very nice and who happened to be, fortunately, a fan of mine.
He was D'Artagnan in one of the Three Musketeer movies.
Yeah, and he was in one of the Zeffirelli version of Romeo and Juliet. That was one of his early movies. He played Tybalt, I think, one of the guys who gets killed in a fight or kills in a fight, one of the many. But in any case, he was very sweet. But then I had a line. They were very few, but I had a few lines. And it was so frightening, to be there, sitting there, and waiting and then when you're sitting around with them between takes, so-called, they all start doing their lines and stuff to you. Like, it's like you're there, right? So
to
they
practice, like
like just stay in character, I guess, or something, while they're moving a camera or whatever they do. And so you'd be like, for a moment, you'd be like having tea or something. I'd be talking to Michael York. And the next thing I know, we'd say something. It's like talking to somebody who's talking, on a cell phone, with the other ear turned away from you. Like, all of a sudden he'd go into this other thing and be his character. And I found that really difficult, even though I only had I think I had 3 lines total in 3 different places. And I was sitting it was supposed to be a conference room. And in the story of the after school special, they were making a video about homelessness in LA. Okay. And so the song that I wrote was all about homelessness. And then they were supposedly it was like a movie within a movie. They were a video within a TV show. They were sitting around at this conference table talking about what they were going to do. And so they asked me a few questions, that these were my lines. And when I saw it later, it was so horrible, because you really can't, everything they do is like, amped up to 11.
right.
And if you're not anywhere near 11 normally,
right,
then it's a big difference between 1 and 11, So whatever, any of the lines I did, it was like they were barely audible, and,
right, because of the soft-spoken.
Yeah.
So, you remember any of the lines? Or just...
One of the lines, my best delivered line was, they said, "We're going to do this and do that." And they looked at me and I said, "Makes sense." And that was one of my lines. The longer lines were not quite as successful,
Can we get that?
Well, Claudia has a copy of it, yeah.
Yeah, so we should contact Claudia to get.
Yes. For a price, she'll probably.
That's great.
I bought up all the copies, actually, that were available.
Really? So nobody can get a hold of it?
Well, my father-in-law, made like 1 million copies. It was back in the days of, VHS.
Oh, right, so you can make copies?
Yeah.
So that was kind of scary.
It was scary.
Yeah.
It was, the other parts were great. Like the musical part of it was great, and I was, thrilled. I won an Emmy for it, which was really nice. Yeah.
Wow. But you didn't win for your acting, though.
No, I wasn't mentioned.
Wow. Okay, so now, what are you working on? Are you writing music, or you?
I'm writing a little bit of music. I've written maybe 4 or 5 things that I like, and I'm trying to finish the book.
Yes.
The novel, and so I work on that in the morning, and then I take a little break and work outside, or if it's winter, I do something. Try to go outside and do something. This winter wasn't very good for winter sports, but
no, not at all.
And then in the evening, in the afternoons, I try to work on some musical ideas or just practice. Just so I'm kind of working on everything at once. I've never done this. I've never done it this way before, but I'm enjoying it. And I really enjoy taking a lot of time now between records. So it helps to kind of be diversified.
Yeah, well, I mean, also, you have so many CDs out, so, we can all wait a little bit for the next one. Do you have an idea when you might be doing the next one, or you're just working on this novel? The novel you're working on, is it fiction?
It's fiction,
It's fiction.
Yeah. It's about, music. It's about a jazz musician and his protege, and it's very cathartic because I can complain about all the things I'd like to complain about publicly,
right?
and do it in this very careful, clandestine way. But the record company, the company I licensed the last record to asked me, has been asking me if I'll do something, and they said, well, why don't you do standards?
Ooh.
But I, I love standards, as you know.
Yeah.
Intimately how much I admire, the great songwriters, the great American songbook, so-called. But I don't hear myself really as a person, as an interpreter of standards, So that was kind of a no take.
Yeah, well, the
but
ones that you've done have been incredible.
Oh, thank you.
That I've heard you heard recorded.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But then there was a plan, to do a duets album. I'll take my old material and obviously rearrange some of it so it would be suitable for duets and do duets with other singers, which is a good idea. But I also thought, well, it'd be great to make it kind of like duets with other players too.
Yeah, that's
and so that's kind of where that is. It's kind of going nowhere, but
well, you have time.
Going around in circles, but a nice, pleasant circle, interesting circles.
Well, I can't wait, of course.
Thank you.
And I think everybody who's listening, whoever's listening, I don't think they can wait either. Now we're at the best part of the show that I like the most. Are you ready to walk down into the basement?
Sure.
Okay. All right. So we've got 3 questions here, and this one kind of revolves around. These questions revolve around the concept of fear. And then the first question: tell us about someone that you've worked with who was a little frightening to you, but in a good way.
Well, I always loved Jobim. I always idolized Antonio Carlos Jobim, and I actually got to meet him at a certain point. I had just finished recording The Art of Tea, and I heard my producer on the phone. I was at his office at Warner Brothers, and I heard him talking to Jobim, and Jobim was going to sign with Warner Brothers. He had actually been signed to Warner Brothers years before, and they were going to re-sign him. And I heard him say that they were going to come to New York and go through this sort of ceremony, have dinner with him, and have him sign the contract, because he was spending the summers in New York in those years. And so for the only time in my life I've ever, been obtrusive, like and said, when he got off the phone, when my producer got off the phone, I said, I couldn't help but overhear. I'm just sitting in his office. I couldn't help but overhear your conversation. Is that Jobim? He said, yeah. And I said, well, if I go to New York, I would just love to meet him. If I get myself to New York, whenever you say, and I materialize on the spot, you say, could I just meet Jobim? And he said, well, you can come with us. You'd be part of our entourage. So it was, it was he and, the engineer that we were going to work with, and a couple of the people from Warner's, a couple of vice presidents or whatever. And we were all suddenly flying to New York, staying in a beautiful hotel. And then instead of only coming to a certain point, and meeting Jobim, like as he was walking out of a restaurant or something, I was sort of like included in the whole junket. So I met him when they met him. I met him when they met him, and then we did have several dinners, and over a period of a few days. But before I met him, I was really kind of, he was such a hero to me that I was really kind of, I had no idea what it turned. Everybody knows he was like one of the nicest people
Right.
on the planet. Like everybody liked the guy.
Yeah.
He could speak fluently, 4 languages, and he was, like very smart, funny, and in any language, and witty and self-deprecating, and a genius, and you could really feel this genius surrounding him like an aura, kind of, and so I was really intimidated when I first went up to his apartment, and as we were waiting, like knocking on his door to come in, I was like, wow, this is. I was like, actually shaking, like, because I had no idea what his personality was like, and I really, of course, admired him, and was kind of like a starstruck fan, I guess.
Yeah.
But he was so sweet, and right away, like he included me in the whole thing. And then, when everybody else left, I stayed for another week, and he included me in that.
Oh, wow.
So I got to spend time with him, and then he invited us down to Brazil, where we recorded about half of Sleeping Gypsy, which was the second album I made at Warner's. And then I spent time with him, in Brazil, and was over at his house. And then every summer after that, when he came to New York, I would see him, and Claudia and I would go and visit him, and, we just had this great sort of friendship with him. And, he was just like one of the greatest, sweetest guys you could ever imagine.
Yeah. So what did you, when you met him, did you stumble? Did you go, did you call him Mr. Jobim? What did you say, Tom? Did you?
As soon as I saw him, I was totally fine. As soon as he opened the door and greeted us, he was very expansive and very warm, but if you don't know that about somebody,
Yes.
you really,
I know.
yeah, you have no idea.
Yeah.
And then, you figure out, wow, this guy wrote this amazing stuff, and he continues to keep writing this great stuff. I had heard the record that they were good. He was going to sell to Warner's, the one that occasioned this meeting that they were having. And that was great. It was all arrangements by Klaus Ogerman, and this beautiful stuff. A lot of it concerned with, the world, the ecological stresses on the planet, which was interesting. I thought an interesting place for him to go, in his music. Still, a lot of it very romantic, and not all the material was about the environment. But
it's interesting that you talk about it. Some of the material being about the environment, because it's really prevalent now. I mean, it stands out even more so because of where we are, right now, in the planet.
Yeah.
Closer to the bad part of it than it is to the good part of it. Yeah.
So that was in 1975.
That was 75.
Yeah.
So your first record was 73.
Well, I made a record before I was on Warner's. That was in 73. Then I signed with Warner's in 75. We made The Art of Tea. Okay. And they didn't really have, they all seemed to like it, but they didn't really know what to do with it. And so it was a drag for me, because we finished the record in June, I think, or July. And then they just kind of sat on it. Mm-hmm. And we went all the way into, I think, March or something of 76 before they released it. But during that time, they acquired George Benson and Al Jarreau and David Sanborn. And so they had like a group of us. They called it Jazz and Progressive.
Oh, okay. That's what they called it?
That's what they called it then, yeah.
Jazz Progressive?
Jazz and Progressive.
And Progressive.
Yeah.
Now, were you scared when you made your first record? I mean, when you went into the studio to record that, was that scary? Or?
I was, because I had only made a few demos before, and in those days, shortly after the invention of the wheel, it was hard to get into a studio and make a tape, have a tape and make, I made a couple of demos at a radio station that, because I knew this young kid who was like a sub engineer there, and also like swept the floors, and he. Somehow I can't remember how we met. I wrote a musical that was produced sort of off Hollywood Boulevard, and this kid was in it, and he had a minor role in it. And it turned out he wanted to be and eventually became a really good engineer, recording engineer. And so he was connected to this radio station as kind of an intern or something. It was the public radio station at the time, KPFK in LA. And I did go over there and I made a pretty nice demo of 5 or 6 tunes. And then, but otherwise, I don't really think I had a chance to make a good tape,
Yeah.
So I was teaching part-time at UCLA, and I was painting. I was working as a house painter, making about 5 times more money as a house painter. But the great thing was I could sort of control my schedule, and so I could have meetings and things. But I used to take my guitar and play tunes, when I wasn't trying to become an artist. I was just trying to see if people would record my songs.
Oh, okay.
And so I didn't really have a demo tape. So it was kind of frightening, to get back to your question, to be in the studio all of a sudden. My producer, a sweet guy who unfortunately passed away recently, was named Richard Markowitz, and he was actually a composer for film and for TV. But he was a great arranger, and he liked all my tunes, and I got involved with this little company that promptly went out of business, and we made that record. But it was scary, yeah. And I did everything live, because you didn't have that much money to make your first record. You didn't have that much money, and so I was like in this little airlock kind of thing in the studio. I could see the orchestra, and some of the things, there were 26 guys out there, strings and horns and the rhythm section. I mean, everything happening at once.
Yeah, wow, because that's how they did it then.
Yeah.
It was all at once. That's right.
And it was scary, I did do overdubs.
Right.
But it was one of the first 16-track records that was made at that studio. It was a studio that was actually well known, kind of famous for doing movie soundtracks, which is how this producer, since he was basically a music movie composer, TV film composer, that's how we ended up there. United Western Studios, very famous place.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. That's a great story, actually. I think that'll help people who are going into the studio for the first time, to hear someone is, you're in the studio a lot. You made so many records. And so after a while, I think for me, I'm always scared no matter what it is, because
it's stressful, right?
It's strange because you can just do it again, but for some reason it never really comes off. You never really think about it that way.
And in terms of your vocals, right? Well, a lot of times, singing live when the track is going down and you're singing live, some great things happen that you can't always replicate those things when then you're there a week later, doing, you want to replace something, and you're there a week later doing your vocal, and there's nobody there but you, and you're looking at people through, glass, and
right.
You're not looking at the players,
That's true.
and you're not feeling what they're doing at this moment in time and space, and so that's a reason, I guess, to be a really, if I were a more disciplined singer, I would be. I kept a lot of my early stuff, much to my own chagrin. Some of the stuff when I hear now, oh my God, why didn't I replace that? But then sometimes you would try to replace things, perfect things, hit a note,
right.
better, or sustain a note better, or something. And you would find that you might get that right, but it would somehow disturb whatever else was happening. And a lot of times you just have to say, well, I'm going to leave the whole thing, whatever the imperfections are. There's some kind of intrinsic energy in there that you can't really replace.
Yeah, I think Miles Davis talked about that, where it, you have to let certain things go, and the imperfect part of it is what, in the whole entire picture, is the perfection of the recording.
Right.
I tend to do more right then and there, 1 take, 2 take, because it's hard for me to stay focused on the lyric and what I'm trying to say and the point. It's really hard for me.
With the band recording again too?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, and
well,
I know how painful that can be.
No, but that's good. It's your record.
Right, that's true.
Play the tune. Play it again.
And I try not to torture them so that way they'll
right.
want to do
another
it again.
Session.
But the record, The Art of Michael Franks, that I recorded of your incredible
Which
songs.
is beautiful, by the way. Thank you so much.
That was a real new experience for me, because I did I didn't record in the same sort of way. I tried to do a lot of it live, and a lot of it is. But some of it I came back later in the studio and I overdubbed the vocals on it, and it was great. I mean, that part of it was great. But I ran across the same sort of things that you talked about, where we sacrifice one part of something for another part,
right?
And in the long run, we just say, okay, if our heart was in the right place and the organic part of it is there, then that's the best way to go for it, I guess, because you can't, there's no way you're going to get that perfection of this with that. But that's actually a great point. Okay, so the next question: what is the scariest work in any medium, which is, painting, photograph, book, movie, television show, radio show, whatever, that you've encountered?
For me, I would say it was the David Lynch TV series called Twin Peaks.
Okay.
I had not even heard about it, and I was on the road, I was working with a great bass player named Steve Rodby. He plays with Pat Metheny now. And he came on the road, and he brought some of that. We were on a bus, and we did have a little setup, with a screen and a VHS kind of deck. And he put some of these early episodes, I guess maybe he had them sequentially arranged. It had just started on television maybe like a month or two before. It was a series, and he started, playing these things. And at first, it was about, well, everybody probably knows what Twin Peaks is about. But it got to it got to a certain point where the evil character is named Bob, and it turns out Bob was actually played by a guy who was just in the crew of the film crew, of the TV crew. He wasn't even an actor, and he didn't really have any spoken lines, but he looked frightening, and just the way David Lynch, arranged him in the whole tableau of the thing, he was really frightening. And I remember seeing one scene with him where I was like, I actually got chills up and down my spine. And then there was a scene, which is probably more well known, where this little person is kind of dancing. I think he also, his dialogue is being played backwards.
Okay. Oh, yeah, I
and he's dancing in a red room, I think it is, which is out in the middle of the woods in like a, evil place that the Native Americans knew about and warned everyone against. And those scenes were really frightening. Like, you really, that was the most frightening thing I think I've ever seen in film.
Yeah, because I think he uses this kind of stop motion type of thing for the little person as he was moving. So it's kind of really jerky, weird.
Right. It was like he was dancing in this right. And then the dialogue was all backwards. It sounded like kind of like Polish or something.
Right. That's parodied. So I think what's the show that I like with Homer Simpson, The Simpsons? Yeah. They did a parody of that particular scene.
Oh, well,
I think Lisa was the one that was dancing.
Oh, God.
It's like, that's I never really was a big fan of Twin Peaks until way. I'm always a fan of things way, years after it's already have been aired. But it's interesting. Now, why would you think that an image like that would be a frightening thing for someone? I mean, you don't have to say why it's frightening to you,
right? But
you know what I mean. What could be?
Well, I don't know. I think probably in childhood, you get some images of things you were really afraid of as a child, like, and they kind of they sort of become maybe crystallized in your mind to the extent that you can remember them and recall them. When I was a kid, like one of the things that scared me was I grew up in the San Diego area, and we lived in an area called Mission Beach, right on the beach. It was an old wooden house, and I don't know why, because I was a kid, I was 4 years old or something, and my parents were in one part of the house, and there was this kitchen, and then there was a little walkway, and there was another little room, kind of like over the garage, and that was my room.
Okay.
So I wasn't even in the house, you know what I mean? I had to go out of my room, across this little parapet, and into the back of the kitchen door, And I remember one time, I don't know what precipitated it, but I remember one time, being in bed and sort of falling. My mother always took me out, and put me to bed and kissed me goodnight and everything was normal. But like there was a coat hanger or something. There was a coat hanging that there was an extra closet out there, and there was something that wasn't normally there that I didn't notice in my waking hours, right? And suddenly, in the darkness or whatever, I looked up and I saw this coat, which in California is a rarity anyway. This coat hanging on a hanger. And, I remember being terrified, like so terrified of that, and then, actually being unable to get out of bed and walk past it, to go into the house to, seek, succor from my parents, you know what I mean, who were blithely, ignoring me. But in any case, I think certain images, I don't know how that relates to the David Lynch Twin Peaks one, but I think when certain images are really vivid like that, you were talking, you included, paintings as your as one of the possible things, works of art or media to refer to. And the first time I went to Europe, I was like a sophomore at UCLA, and I took I hitchhiked around Europe, and I forget where, somewhere in Germany, I saw the Hieronymus Bosch, the Garden of Earthly Delights, I think it's called, and it's this thing where all these people are inside these little egg-like things and falling out of the mouths of demons, and it's just it's like a bad trip. It's don't take the brown acid. It's like a really bad trip. And I remember when I looked at that painting, going, oh my God, wow, that is horrible. But because it was static and it was just a painting, and you could, peruse, you have more control with the painting. You can look at the parts you want and scan or whatever, and you're going, that is a static object hanging on a wall in a museum. Whereas film tends to suck you in anyway. And any kind of film media, you sort of very easily suspend the willing suspension of disbelief. You very easily suspend your disbelief in a film, Yeah,
it's true.
And that was before, obviously, the David Lynch thing was all acted and performed and designed, and it was before computer graphics, and so I think in that way it was much more, ironically, much more realistic as a frightening image, I guess.
Yeah, and it's all, when you think of all the things from childhood that is buried deep in our subconscious, and then all of the visual things that we encounter as we grow up, it all kind of combines, and then we see a TV show or you see a movie, and all of those things are stirring in the deep depths of the water, and they combine in a remarkable way sometimes that doesn't always seem as if they're connected, but it is that weird. I always think of those images that you see, Salvador Dali's types of images where things are melting into, and I think part of that probably for me is that surrendering to the whole, the whole, the unknown of the entire picture. When we think of we're like individuals, but the goal for us is to be able to be part of a whole, to accept ourselves as part of the whole. So for me, it's always anything that's melting into, the vastness of the whole, even though I know that's probably what our spiritual goals are, is to recognize that we're, all one, but that kind of fear, can be really.
Oh yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
It's like, ooh, okay. What about me? Where did I go?
Yeah, that's right. Wait a minute. Who am I? Where am I?
So so now we're at the final question, which is, what is the scariest thing that has ever happened to you while performing live?
Well, I debated whether the answer, both these answers, but I kind of, thought of this one time when I played, I think it was in the mid-'80s, I played the Heineken Jazz Festival in Paris a couple of times. And it was outdoors in the Tuileries Gardens, beautiful, And I had just worked with John Patitucci before then on a record, and John was playing with Chick Corea in a trio, and Chick was on right in front of us. We were closing the show, and he had chosen the best spot, the best spot in the sequence, and of course they were great. We went to see their show, but the whole time he was playing, there was this thunderstorm thing building, and I didn't think much of it. It's summer in Paris, and like in the afternoon, like it's kind of it was hot, muggy, but you didn't think much about it. And Chick was playing this beautiful, it seemed like a 35-foot Bosendorfer piano that was right out there, and there was nothing. There's a little sort of like floating, pretty little thing. It was more like an piece of artwork floating over the stage, like a little like parachute kind of thing, silk, and it wasn't anything protective.
Right.
And so then they did this gig. I got to meet Chick, which I was thrilled to meet him, and spoke to those guys a bit. And then it was time for us to go on. Well, by the time we got on, we got in maybe to like the third or fourth tune, and it started to be violent,
Okay.
and it was sort of windy. So the audience was right there. Nobody moved. Not one person got up.
Yeah.
And so I thought, well, I'm going to stay, until somebody says leave, or until the audience starts to leave. And it started to rain. Everybody stayed right where they were. And so there was enough of this little cover to cover the microphone, sort of. But then the lightning. It started to be lightning.
Okay.
And that was frightening. And lightning, and this poor Bosendorfer was like getting wet, and nobody seemed to be in charge. Nobody. Finally, my own tour manager came out and said, "Leave the stage." We went off. But I think, and that was scary, like physically scary, like being struck by lightning.
Yeah.
And I remember, I'm sure this has happened to you a few times. Every once in a while, you get a mic that has a short in or something, and you touch it, and you get like a little shock on your lip.
Yeah.
And so that was happening, and I asked for a windscreen, a little windscreen to be put on, so that solved that problem. But it just was, it was like, wow, and then in my sort of workman like French, I asked everybody. I said, everybody, I think we should all leave, and they did. Eventually, the audience left after we did. But the thing that I think is most terrifying, which is my real answer. Sorry to be so long-winded.
No, I love it.
Which you know really well.
Yeah, I love it.
Is that when you're on stage and you're singing, with my tunes especially, like some of them, if I forget part of a lyric, or if I make a very innocent mistake, because doing it, as you know, like it's weird because you can't really think about it. You're kind of concentrating on everything. You want to sing in tune.
Yeah.
You want to be able to hear yourself.
Right.
You want to be, as much as I'm able, which isn't that much, to project what you're doing. So you're working the microphone and you're thinking about all the technical aspects of it, and you want to be inside what you're doing. You want to be back inside the song, which, after all, in my case, I wrote. So I want to be like in it, to express it in like a way that I feel, at least. So you're doing all these things. Well, the lyrics, in a way, you're kind of doing it almost, by, it's just almost like something. Well, yeah, I got to think about this, but you don't really think about it that much.
Yeah.
Because you're kind of, it's kind of like this, more like, rather than a focal point, it's more like this kaleidoscopic thing, and you're kind of constantly trying to adjust these things, all these different things. Mm-hmm. Your sound, the sound, what you're hearing, what the band is playing. You're singing in tune, being in pitch, and then, of course, the lyrics. Well, as you know from experience, being with me all these 20 years. Even if I don't necessarily make a mistake, if I sing, like, for example, if I'm on the second verse of a tune and I accidentally start with the third verse, then then there's usually a solo. Or a chorus or something, when I get to the third verse, I have no idea what the verse is, because you're doing it in the sequential way. It's like, if you thought hard about riding a bike or something, you go, wow, how does this even work? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you just don't think about it. And the only way it works is if you're moving.
Right.
So once you stop moving, you're in trouble. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
And that's kind of what happens. And so that is because I get like this sense of dread. And fortunately, you have, supplied me in all the problem areas of my lyrics. You supplied me with your own text over there on your, music stand. And even though I can't see it unless I walk right over and stand, I know I can. I always know I can walk over and pretend like we're saying something and to look at it to see what the hell it is.
Yeah. And it is scary because because we're in that moment of telling that story. If the lyrics get mixed up and you repeat the same thing, it's as if you're telling a story, but then all of a sudden you leave out like the key part to it that puts the whole story together.
Exactly.
So I can see it is really scary.
But that's not so bad. If you can think of anything, even if you just repeat it.
And you can though, because you're the writer. You can come up with that
but
stuff.
I mean, sometimes I can't even think of what it was that I could repeat. Because you've only got time's running out. You see the grains of sand falling through the flowing through the hourglass, and it's like, well, what do I do now? Yeah.
And has there ever been a time when you were performing live where, I mean, I've been with you for 20 years, and you mentioned that, and I meant to mention that at the very top, because today, June 10th, in 1993, was the very first gig I played with you in Aruba with the band. Mm-hmm. And so 20 years later, we're still here. Better than some married couples, right?
A lot better.
And I have been, over the 20 years, I got to a point where I wanted to have the lyrics there, because that's a fear of mine too. Mm-hmm. And especially when I'm working with you, because we had an incident where we played in South Africa, and we were in that big hangar. Yeah. And we were doing, I think, Monk's New Tune. Mm-hmm. And there was just nothing. I mean, I didn't even know the song. You know what I mean? I couldn't even, wasn't even so much about lyrics. It was just, I did not even know the song at all. And it was so terrifying that I decided from that point on, I was always going to cheat and have lyrics. Because the Cats always have, their music stands with the music. Right. So I said, well, I'll have that too.
That was a great idea.
Yeah, so I figured, that kind of helps us both. But, well, you know what? I am so grateful that you came and gave me this time.
My pleasure.
People listening, and it's been great working with you for 20 years.
And the same is true.
60 more years.
Yeah. As long as we can make it to the gig.
As long as we can make it to the gig, and bathrooms are right near where we gotta go. We don't have to go too far.
Well, we've had some pretty amazing experiences, which is so great too.
Yeah, we have.
Not all of it we could put on the air, but...
No. But, could go in your book, maybe. Put some
no, that's true. I mean, that's what's so cathartic about writing the book. Because, you can actually, describe some of the, insulting things that have happened to us over the course of the last 20 years. And you're, removed from it. You're one step removed from it. And it's in another, from the voice of another person.
Yeah,
so
and people would never know. They would never know. They would just think, oh, wow, what a great imagination or great development of a character.
And as you know, the public assumes that it's like this, this grand life, that it's always this grand thing. Yeah. It's everybody's fantasy, I guess, to be on the road, on tour, being a musical band. And they don't see the parts of it that are kind of where the real world. I mean, it's fun to perform.
Yeah. Oh, that's the best part of it.
Yeah, that's the easy part.
Yeah, that is the easy
But the travel and all the other parts and the technical aspects before a show, getting the sound right,
that's fearful.
It is.
We've been at some
and
very
how about
fearful...
the things where we've all the jazz festivals we've played where you don't even get to have a sound check. You just parachute down on the stage, right. And it's like hit it, and you don't have any clue what anything is.
Oh, yeah.
If you can hear yourself or anyone else at all.
So it's like we work through, there are all these scenarios of these fear factors, so to speak, and we just work through them. And after a while, we get used to understanding, okay, there's going to be some really messed up stuff happening, and you get past the fear of it, and you just get it done. Yeah. Because the core, as you're saying, is the performing live, and the people who pay their money. And I always have this thing where I say, people get up, they get dressed, they come out of their houses, they go somewhere, they pay their money, and they're here to see us.
Yeah.
And nowadays, with all the technology, people don't even have to leave their homes. So it is so much for us to make sure that performance and the things that we do, despite all other things that come up.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
It's great, and I love it. And I thank you again, and
My
I will
pleasure.
see you in a couple of months. We have in August, right? August.
Las Vegas.
Las Vegas, and then September we have Detroit. No, August is
Detroit.
is Detroit.
September,
and
Las
September
Vegas.
is Vegas, and then we're going to Japan
Yeah.
in October,
Yeah.
which should be really interesting to see.
That's
to do
always
that.
great, isn't it?
I love Japan.
It's the greatest. Me too.
Yeah, it's just
They are
great.
the greatest people.
Very much so.
Yeah.
So I got to have you back at some point. So you let me know when you have some new scary things that that are coming up this way. But thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you, Veronica.
All right. All right. Cut. So that was great, right? Did you? I'm sorry the seat was so hard, but
Yeah.
I tried to put a little cushion.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it's yeah, that's.
The jazz side is always there, waiting for us to enter and waiting to enter us. So, until next time, unplug your ear holes, for you never know what worlds may be waiting for you.